Hello, fellow educators. This is Tamra. I'm just here today addressing a subject that's on all of our minds. And that's how can we make our online learning into an engaging experience for our students? And so, in the rush to get our courses online, we had spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to continue our instruction, but how to continue it in the same way that we had done it when we were teaching face to face. But now, as we look forward to teaching online maybe in the future, we have this unique advantage because we can now think and reflect a little bit on how the unique characteristics of online learning can be used and leveraged for the benefit of our teaching in the future. And so there's a couple of elements about online learning that you don't actually fully experience when you're teaching face to face. And I want to talk about those briefly. Now, the first benefit is when you're doing online learning, and you have this chance to reach your students, but you're reaching your students not at the time that you say. In other words, not at a certain date, at a certain time, in a certain place. Instead, if you offer your online learning asynchronously, so asynchronous means at a time when the other person chooses. So all you have to do is provide the content, and then the student decides when they're going to access the content and when they're going to interact with it, and they're going to do and learn what they need to learn. And so by offering things asynchronously, then the student has this independence in their time and in the place that they do this to achieve their learning. And so one good way for this to happen is to actually create prompts or short questions about your reading, and to put those questions in one of two places that I'm going to suggest. So one place is on the discussion forum. And on Blackboard itself, there's a discussion forum. And if you use another learning management system, these kinds of things exist all the time. And you just put a prompt there, it's in writing, and you ask students to respond to it, and they respond back to it in writing. But there's also a web-based tool. And that web-based tool, there's many of them, but one that's really used a lot by educators is something called VoiceThread. And so in VoiceThread, you actually put your prompt in either written or with your voice, and you ask students to respond to it with their voice. And the great thing about using this VoiceThread is it's much more engaging even than using written texts. And so I'm recommending those two tools for the discussion forum or for VoiceThread, because then your students become more involved with the content of your course, and because they can access it at any time that they want to in order to respond to what you've asked them to talk about. Now, the other advantage for online learning is that, in fact, the students can access those materials anytime, but also when they're doing that, they are being independent learners. And so you're no longer that so-called sage on the stage in this situation. And instead, what you're doing is you're guiding the student through a learning process. And you are also producing a self-regulated student that's independent and knows how to construct their own learning environment. And that's exactly what we as educators are trying to encourage in our students. So online learning seems to be an excellent platform for this independent learning. And that's why my second resource that I'm going to suggest for you is something called Screencast-O-Matic. So Screencast-O-Matic is this tool. It's a web-based tool where you can take either audio or visual or both of your screen. And so the great thing about it is that it's something that you can use to show how to do something or demonstrate what you need to do and the steps that have to be taken to achieve something. Now, educators like me love Screencast-O-Matic, but what I'm suggesting here is that you can actually have your students use Screencast-O-Matic. And when your students use Screencast-O-Matic, they can teach other people what they've learned. And so what you could do, for example, is have a reading with your students and divide the reading up and have each student take a part of the reading, learn it, and teach it on Screencast-O-Matic. And on that, they can either just have the webcam on them and they talk about it, or they could actually show their screen, show the highlighting in their text, how they've annotated their text, and I'm sorry, how they've annotated their text. And when they do that, that's another way of them showing knowledge that they've gained in your course. And I think that's another way for students to interact and for your online situation to be much more active for students that are involved in your course. So to summarize, what I've said is that I think that online learning offers an opportunity for all of us to see our students choose when they want to learn, because our content can be offered asynchronously through a discussion forum or through VoiceThread. And it also offers a possibility for students to become responsible for their own learning by teaching what they're learning to someone else using a web tool like Screencast-O-Matic. So I'll be back in touch with you as I come across more tools that I think are useful for online facilitation and learning.